Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Lena couldn't explain the feeling, but the whispers had been with her for as long as she could remember. They were soft, like the rustling of leaves just on the edge of her consciousness, always present whenever she wandered near the forest that bordered her small village. As a child, she thought everyone heard the voices, but as she grew older, she realized that wasn't entirely the case. Her parents had shrugged it off. Her friends had laughed at her, but the whispers persisted. They were calling her. The forest was vast, ancient, and intimidating. The villagers rarely ventured deep into it, warning of dangerous beasts and treacherous terrain. But Lena wasn't afraid. Something within the trees beckoned her, like an unspoken promise of understanding, of belonging. At 17, she felt the pull more strongly than ever. Today, it was almost unbearable. The whispers weren't just calling anymore. They were demanding. She found herself standing at the edge of the forest, her hand gripping the strap of her small leather satchel. Inside were a few provisions, water, bread, and a small knife she barely knew how to use. Her heart raced, but it wasn't free from fear. She knew she had to go. She'd spent her life wondering what those whispers meant, and now, on the cusp of adulthood, she had no choice but to follow them. The sunlight dimmed as Lena stepped under the canopy of towering oaks and birches. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of earth and moss. Shadows stretched across the forest floor, and the whispers intensified, growing clearer, more insistent. It wasn't 2 words exactly, but she could feel the intent. They were guiding her deeper into the forest, towards something hidden and ancient. Lena moved with purpose, weaving through the underbrush, as if she had walked this path 1,000 times before. Hours passed, and the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows. She should have been tired, but a strange energy coursed through her, pushing her forward. As the forest thickened, Lena stumbled upon a clearing she had never seen before, though she had roamed these woods her whole life. The ground here was covered in soft green moss, and at the center of the clearing, a faint shimmer hung in the air. It was barely noticeable at first, like a ripple in a pond, but as Lena approached, the shimmer became more distinct, a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, urging her toward the shimmer. She hesitated, her hand reaching out, trembling. Every instinct told her that this was the moment. This was why the forest had called to her all these years. Without another thought, she stepped forward, passing through the shimmering veil. The world around her shifted. Lena blinked, trying to adjust to her new surrounding. The forest was still there, but everything felt different, sharper, more vibrant. The trees were taller, their leaves a deep emerald green that shimmered in the dappled sunlight. The air was thick with magic. She could feel it humming beneath her skin. She had crossed into another realm. Before she could take in more of her surroundings, she heard movement behind her. Spinning around, she found herself face to face with a group of tall, slender figures. They were beautiful in a way that felt almost otherworldly. Their skin was pale, their hair long and silver, and their eyes glowed faintly with a soft green light. They wore intricate armor, fashioned from wood and metal, and each carried a long, elegant sword. The one standing closest to her, a woman with sharp features and piercing eyes, stepped forward, her sword raised defensively. "Who are you?" the elf demanded, her voice low and melodic, but filled with suspicion. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. "I am Lena." She hesitated, unsure of what to say. How could she explain that she had been called here by voices only she could hear? "You were human," the elf said, her eyes narrowing. "How did you find this place?" I told the Ivy Flowers, heard the whispers. They led me here," Lena explained, her voice shaky. The elf frowned, lowering her sword slightly. "No human has stepped foot in our kingdom for centuries. You shouldn't be here." Lena opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, another voice called out, "Wait." From behind the group of elves emerged a tall, regal woman, her presence commanding and her long flowing robes shimmering with a soft golden light. Her silver hair was woven into an intricate braid, and a delicate crown rested upon her brow. This was Queen Elandra, ruler of the forgotten Elven kingdom. The queen studied Lena for a long moment, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and something else, recognition. "You've been called," Elandra said, softly, more to herself than to anyone else. Lena blinked, confused. "Called by what?" Elandra smiled faintly. though there was a sadness in her eye. By the magic of this land, it has recognized you, child. You carry the blood of the ancient. Lena stared at the queen, her mind racing. Blood of the ancients. What did that even mean? The magic within you is strong. Mealindra continued, stepping closer. It has been dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And now, with the kingdom in peril, you have come. In peril, Lena echoed, glancing around at the elves, all of whom were watching her with a mixture of awe and worriness. Mealindra's expression darkened. The Orcas have returned. They have been raiding our lands, burning villages, and slaughtering our people. We are outnumbered, and our defenses grow weaker with each passing day. But you may be the key to turning the tide. Lena's stomach churned. I don't understand. You are Mealindra, interrupted gently. The magic within you is ancient, powerful. You are the descendant of one of our greatest mages. That power is now yours to wield, but you must learn to control it. Lena felt a surge of panic. She wasn't a mage. She was just a girl from a small village. How could she possibly help these people fight a war?
I don't know how to use magic, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper.
You will, Mealindra said, her voice filled with quiet confidence, and we will help you. Lena's surge training began the next day. Arian, the young elven warrior assigned to train her, was patient but firm. He guided her through basic exercises, helping her tap into the magic that flowed through her veins. At first, it was difficult, frustrating, but as the days passed, Lena began to feel the power within her, like a current waiting to be unleashed. She learned to summon light, to heal small wounds, and to protect herself with barriers of shimmering energy. But the more she learned, the more she felt the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. This wasn't a game. The Orcas were real, and they were coming. Each night, Lena lay awake thinking about the battle that loomed on the horizon. She had never fought in a war. The thought of facing the Orcas, the brutal savage creatures that had terrorized the Elven kingdom for centuries, filled her with dread. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Lena sat on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Elven capital. The city was beautiful, with its towering spires and glowing lights, but there was a tension in the air, a sense of foreboding that hung over everything. Arian joined her, sitting down beside her in silence for a moment before speaking. "You're doing well," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Lena shook her head. "I don't feel like I am doing well. I feel like I am just surviving. That's all any of us can do right now," Arian replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We all scared, even the queen, but we fight because we have to, because if we don't, everything we love will be destroyed." Lena bit her lip, feeling a lump form in her throat. What if I'm not enough? What if I fail? Arian turned to her, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "You won, fail. I've seen what you're capable of. Lena, you have more power than you realize, and when the time comes, you will know what to do." Lena wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that she could make a difference, that she could help the elves win this war, but the doubt still lingered, gnawing at the edges of her mind. The day of the battle arrived sooner than Lena had anticipated. The Orcas marched on the Elven capital in force, their massive armies stretching across the horizon like a dark, unstoppable tide. The air was thick with the stench of smoke and blood, and the ground shook beneath the weight of their advance. Lena stood on the front lines with Arian and the other elven warriors, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the magic thrumming inside her, but she wasn't sure if it would be enough. As the Orcs' army approached, Lena Olla's breath came in shallow gasps. She had never seen such a terrifying sight, rows upon rows of hulking beasts, their armor glinting in the pale sunlight, their weapons raised high, ready to tear through anything in their path. Their leader, Grathok, stood at the front, a towering figure of muscle and rage. His black armor was covered in jagged spikes, and his eyes gleamed with a hunger for destruction. He was a monster in every sense of the word. Lena gripped her staff tightly, feeling the familiar pulse of magic coursing through her fingers. Arian stood beside her, his face a mask of calm determination, though she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hand clenched around the hilt of his sword. Around them, the elven warriors braced themselves for the onslaught. The battle erupted with a deafening roar as the Orcas charged. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the sky darkened with the smoke of burning villages and the dust kicked up by their march. The elves met them head-on, their graceful movements a stark contrast to the brutish ferocity of the Orcas. Blades clashed, Arrows flew, and the air was thick with the sounds of war. Lena's heart raced as she found herself in the midst of the chaos. Orcas were everywhere, snarling, swinging massive axes and swords, their foul breath hot on her face. She raised her staff, summoning a shield of shimmering light just in time to deflect a blow aimed at her head. The force of the strike sent her stumbling back, but she managed to hold her ground, her magic flowing through her like a river. Harion was a blur of motion beside her, his sword flashing as he cut down one orc after another. He moved with the grace of a dancer, each strike precise and deadly. But for every orc that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. The sheer number of them was overwhelming. Lena focused on her magic, sending blasts of energy toward the orcas, pushing them back, trying to create some space. She could feel the strain on her body, the way the magic tugged at her very core, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The elves were depending on her. But it wasn't enough. The orcas were too many, too strong. For every orc that was cut down, more surged forward, relentless in their assault. The elves were being pushed back, their once elegant formations now a desperate scramble to survive. Lena's muscles burned as she fought to keep her magic flowing. She could feel herself growing weaker with each spell, her energy draining faster than she could replenish it. She glanced around, her eyes widening as she realized they were losing ground. The orcas were closing in, their massive forms towering over the elves. The city was within sight now, and Lena knew that if they reached it, the Elven kingdom would fall. She had to do something. She had to stop them. In the chaos of battle, she spotted Grathok, the orc warlord, charging toward the heart of the Elven forces. His black armor gleamed in the dim light, and his eyes blazed with a terrifying, unnatural fury. He was heading for the ancient tree at the center of the city, the artifact the orcas had been after all along. Lena's heart lurched. The tree was the source of the elves' magic, their lifeblood. If Grathok reached it, everything would be lost. Without thinking, she broke away from the front line, sprinting toward the tree, her magic surging within her, driving her forward. Grathok was already there, standing at the base of the ancient tree, his massive hands wrapped around the trunk as if he could tear it down with brute strength alone. Lena could feel the power emanating from the tree, ancient and potent, but it was fading, weakening with each passing moment. No, Lena screamed, raising her staff and sending a bolt of energy hurtling toward the orc warlord. Grathok turned, his eyes narrowing as the blast struck him in the chest. He staggered back, snarling in pain and fury, but he didn't fall. Instead, he charged at Lena, his massive axe raised high. Lena barely had time to react, raising her shield just as the axe came crashing down. The impact sent shockwaves through her body, her knees buckling under the force of the blow. She stumbled, gasping for breath, but she couldn't stop. She had to protect the tree. She had to stop it. Grathok swung again, but this time Lena was ready. She dodged to the side, her magic flaring to life as she sent another blast of energy toward him. This one struck him in the side, and he let out a roar of pain, his grip on the axe faltering. Lena pressed the advantage, her magic flowing through her like wildfire. She could feel it burning inside her, stronger than ever before, pushing her to her limit. The air around her crackled with power as she summoned every ounce of magic she had, sending it toward Grathok in a final desperate attack. The blast hit him square in the chest, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Grathok's eyes widened in shock, and then with a deafening roar, he collapsed to the ground, his massive body crashing into the earth. Lena stood there, panting, her entire body trembling with exhaustion. She had done it. She had stopped him. But the battle wasn't over. The orcas were still advancing, and the elves were barely holding them back. The tree behind her shimmered with a faint, flickering light, its power fading fast. Lena knew what she had to do. She turned to the tree, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers that had guided her here were louder now, clearer, as if the forest itself was speaking to her. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the bark, and in that moment, she felt the full weight of the magic within her. It was ancient, powerful, and bound to the very essence of this land. Closing her eyes, Lena let the magic flow through her, merging with the tree's energy. She could feel it coursing through her veins, filling her with a strength she had never known. The pain and exhaustion melted away, replaced by a sense of peace and clarity. With a deep breath, She released the magic, sending it out in a wave of light that washed over the battlefield. The effect was immediate. The orcas who had been so close to victory faltered. Their weapons fell from their hands, and they stumbled backward, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. The elves, sensing the shift in power, rallied, pushing the orcas back with renewed vigor. Lena opened her eyes, her vision blurred with exhaustion, but she could see the tide turning. The elves were winning. The orcas were retreating. The battle was over. Lena sank to her knees, the weight of the magic finally lifting from her shoulder. She was exhausted, but she had done it. She had saved the Elven kingdom. As the dust settled and the remaining orcas fled, Arian rushed to her side, his fetched with concern. "Lena, are you all right?" She nodded weakly, a small smile tugging at her lips. I am fine." Arian helped her to her feet, his eyes filled with admiration. "You did it. You saved us." Lena glanced at the ancient tree, its light now glowing steady and bright. She had protected it, just as the whispers had guided her to do. "I couldn't have done it without all of you," she said softly, looking out over the battlefield. The elves were gathering now, tending to the wounded and mourning the fallen, but there was a sense of relief in the air. The kingdom had been saved, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, peace had returned to the forest. As Lena stood there, her heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened, she realized that her journey was far from over. The whispers had guided her to this moment, but they were quiet now, leaving her with a sense of peace. She had found her place in this world, and though she didn't know what the future held, she knew she was ready to face it. With a final glance at the ancient tree, Lena turned and walked away from the battlefield, Arian by her side. The elves would rebuild, and she would find her own path wherever it might lead.